The distress signal arrived just after dawn, when the twin moons of Nerith were fading into the pale copper sky, and Elias Venn was attempting to convince his breakfast machine that coffee and engine lubricant were not the same substance. The machine disagreed with the confidence of an imperial judge. One day, Elias muttered, staring into the smoking cup, "You're going to kill me, and the official report will say I died of poor maintenance." The alarm on his wrist interrupted with 3 sharp pulses. Unknown shuttle, atmospheric failure, emergency descent beyond the eastern ridge. 10 minutes later, Elias was racing across the colony plain in an old rescue crawler whose suspension had developed a personal hatred of his spine. Above him, a silver vessel tore through the clouds, trailing sparks and ribbons of blue plasma. It was smaller than a transport ship, elegant despite its damage, shaped like a narrow leaf of polished metal. Its engines coughed once, loudly enough to shake dust from the crawler's dashboard, then died. The shuttle struck the ground beyond the ridge and slid through a field of glass grass, throwing up glittering shards before stopping against a black stone formation. Elias reached it before the colony security drones. The outer hull was scorched, one wing half buried in the soil. Strange symbols moved across its surface like living ink. As he approached, a section of the hull opened with a soft hiss. The woman who stepped out looked almost human. She was tall, pale-skinned, and dressed in fitted silver armor marked by thin green lines of light. Long blonde hair fell over one shoulder, dusty from the crash, and her ears rose into elegant points beside her head. Her face was controlled, but fear lived clearly in her eyes. Behind her stood a little girl. She looked no older than 7. Her hair was the same pale gold as her mother's, though cut unevenly around her shoulders. Her long ears trembled slightly whenever the damaged shuttle made a noise. She held something under her coat with both hands and remained half hidden behind the woman's leg. Elias raised both palms. "Human Rescue Service," he said slowly. "I'm here to help. I also brought medical supplies, tools, and one deeply unreliable vehicle." The woman touched a small device at her throat. A translation field flickered around her voice. "You are alone? My courage is larger when nobody is available to witness my mistakes." The woman stared at him. The little girl's eyes widened. Then very faintly she smiled. It vanished so quickly Elias wondered whether he had imagined it. "My name is Sayela," the woman said. "This is my daughter, Liri." Elias crouched a little, careful not to move too close. "Hello, Liri." The girl immediately lowered her gaze and pressed herself against her mother. Something metallic clicked beneath her coat. Elias noticed Sayela glance down at the sound. Her expression softened with a sadness so brief it seemed private. The shuttle's interior flashed red. A mechanical voice began repeating a warning in a language Elias did not understand. "That sounds bad," he said. "The core seal is failing." "That is exactly as bad as it sounds." They moved quickly. Elias connected his rescue pack to the shuttle's damaged energy system, while Sayela stabilized a cracked magnetic conduit with a tool that unfolded like a flower. Liri remained near the doorway, watching silently. Every few seconds she checked the object beneath her coat, making sure it was still there. Elias caught a glimpse of it when the wind shifted the fabric. A small handmade creature with 4 uneven legs, a round crystal body, and tiny brass wings. It looked worn from years of being held. One of its eyes was a blue bead. The other was missing. "That's a fine little machine," Elias said gently. Liri covered it at once. Sayela's head turned sharply. "Do not ask her for it." "I wasn't going to. She does not allow anyone to touch it." Elias nodded and returned to the power cable. "Fair enough. I have a wrench like that." Sayela looked at him in confusion. "I don't let anyone touch it either." For the second time, Liri almost smiled. The core temperature began to fall. The red lights shifted to amber and the warning voice stopped complaining. Elias leaned back against the hull, breathing hard. "Your vessel will survive," he said. "It may never forgive you, but it will survive." Sayela studied him with cautious relief. "You speak strangely." I've been told it's a medical condition. Liri stepped a fraction farther from behind her mother. Her eyes stayed fixed on Elias, curious now rather than frightened. Far above them, something moved behind the clouds, a dark shape, too large to be a colony drone and too silent to be thunder. Scylla saw it too. Her hand tightened around her weapon. Elias followed her gaze. Friends of yours? No, she whispered. Liri clutched the hidden toy against her chest, and the tiny crystal inside it gave a single pulse of golden light. The dark shape vanished before Elias could identify it, dissolving into the copper clouds as if the sky had swallowed it. Scylla remained motionless for several seconds, one hand resting on the compact weapon at her hip. Liri pressed the handmade toy against her chest so tightly that its brass wings bent beneath her fingers. Did you recognize the ship? Elias asked. No. That answer sounded suspiciously like yes. Scylla looked at him. It was not a ship belonging to anyone who would help us. Better. Much more comforting. The colony security drones arrived at last, 6 polished spheres humming over the ridge in a precise formation. Their blue scanner beams swept across the damaged shuttle, Elias, Scylla, and finally Liri. The girl retreated behind her mother again when one drone approached too closely. Elias stepped into its path. Back away. The drone rotated toward him. Interference with emergency inspection is punishable by... I repaired your charging station last month. The drone paused. Elias folded his arms. Without reporting that someone had filled the ventilation ducts with soup. After a long mechanical silence, the drone moved away. Scylla watched it retreat. Your machines can be threatened with embarrassment? Only the intelligent ones. By midday, the shuttle had been surrounded by repair platforms and portable force screens. Elias arranged temporary accommodation for Scylla and Liri in an unused research residence near the edge of the colony. It was a low white building with transparent walls that darkened automatically when someone wanted privacy. Unfortunately, the house interpreted sneezing as a request to open every window. Elias discovered this when dust from the damaged ventilation unit entered his nose. He sneezed once. All 12 windows slid open at the same time, allowing a cloud of red pollen to pour inside. Scylla stared at him through the haze. The house is welcoming you, Elias said. Liri made a tiny sound that might have been a laugh. During the following days, Elias divided his time between repairing the shuttle and helping the visitors adjust to colony life. Scylla understood human technology quickly, but human customs confused her. She examined chairs before sitting, distrusted doors without biometric locks, and reacted to a kitchen timer as though it were an assassination device. Liri spoke to no one. She followed her mother closely, always holding the strange handmade creature. Sometimes she concealed it beneath her coat. Sometimes she kept it wrapped in a silver cloth beside her while she slept. Even when eating, one hand remained on the toy. Elias never asked to see it again. Instead, he left harmless objects near her. A magnetic puzzle, a wind-up lunar beetle, and a miniature repair drone programmed to salute whenever it crashed into furniture. The drone saluted often. On the 4th evening, Elias found Liri sitting beneath a glowing tree outside the residence. Nereth's ornamental trees stored sunlight during the day and released it after dark in soft green ripples. Liri sat among their luminous roots, turning the toy slowly in her hands. Elias lowered himself onto a stone several meters away. I had a toy once, he said. A pilot made of cloth. I carried him everywhere. Liri glanced at him. He survived 3 colony transfers, a meteor evacuation, and my mother's washing machine. Her eyes narrowed with interest. The washing machine was the dangerous part. Liri looked down at her own toy. Its crystal body glowed faintly from within. Scylla appeared quietly behind them. Her father made it. Elias turned. Scylla's long ears lowered slightly, the movement so subtle that he understood it was grief before her expression changed. He built it from parts of his first navigation engine, she continued. After he died, Liri repaired it herself. She has not allowed another person to hold it. Not even me. Liri's fingers tightened around the brass wings. Elias nodded slowly. Then it belongs exactly where it is. Saela studied him, perhaps expecting another question. He offered none. The next morning, a floating translator creature arrived from the colony communication office. It resembled a translucent jellyfish and insisted on hovering beside Saela's shoulder while translating every nearby sound. A cupboard closed. Hostile wooden structure has completed attack, the creature announced. A spoon fell. Metallic object has surrendered. Liri stared at it for several seconds before covering her mouth to hide a smile. Even Saela laughed. The sound changed her face completely. For the first time, Elias saw how young she truly was beneath the armor, fear and exhaustion. Then every light in the residence went out. The translator creature dropped onto the table with a wet slap. Outside, the glowing trees faded one after another. Far across the settlement, colony towers lost power in a spreading wave of darkness. Elias rose immediately. "That is not normal," Saela said. "No. Normally the colony breaks one building at a time." A deep vibration passed beneath their feet. Liri's toy answered with a pulse of golden light brighter than before. Across the room, the dark window reflected 3 figures standing together. Behind their reflection, high in the night sky, a silent black vessel emerged from invisibility. The black vessel hung above the colony without lights, markings, or visible engines. It seemed less like a machine than a hole cut into the stars. For several seconds, nobody moved. Even the residence's emergency system remained silent, as though it had decided panic was a private matter. Then the power returned. Every lamp flashed at once. The translator creature rose from the table, shook itself, and announced, "Electrical civilization has resumed." Elias stared through the window. "Good. I was worried civilization had filed a resignation." Saela pulled Liri behind her and activated the weapon at her hip. A thin blade of green energy unfolded from the handle with a quiet hum. The black vessel disappeared. It did not accelerate or turn. One moment it was there. The next, stars occupied the space where it had been. Saela lowered her weapon only slightly. "They found us," she said. "Who?" "I do not know yet. You say alarming things with impressive calm. I am not calm." Liri reached for her mother's hand. The golden light inside her toy faded, though Elias noticed it continued to pulse in time with the child's breathing. The colony authorities treated the power failure as a routine grid disturbance, mostly because their surveillance systems had recorded nothing in the sky. Elias submitted a report describing the invisible vessel. The central computer rejected it twice and finally categorized it as possible atmospheric bird. It was 300 meters long, Elias complained. The computer replied, large bird. By morning, the colony resumed preparations for the interspecies festival. Transparent ribbons floated between the buildings, held aloft by magnetic threads. Food stalls unfolded from the pavement, and musicians tested instruments that produced colors instead of sound. Elias suspected the officials were using celebration as a defense mechanism. Humans had survived many disasters by placing tables near them and offering snacks. Saela wanted to remain inside, but Liri stood at the window watching children chase holographic animals through the square. Her expression held a quiet longing. "They will not harm her," Elias said. Saela looked toward the crowded streets. "You cannot promise that." "No, but I can promise the festival food will harm everyone equally." Liri's ears lifted. An hour later, they entered the square. The little girl stayed close to her mother, her toy hidden beneath a pale coat. People glanced at her long ears and unfamiliar clothing, but most returned quickly to their games and meals. A human boy offered her a floating sugar sphere. It escaped his hand, struck Elias in the forehead, and burst into pink powder. Liri stared at him. Elias wiped sugar from his eyebrows. Diplomatic relations are progressing. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Scylla turned in surprise. It was the clearest sound Liri had made since arriving. Elias pretended not to notice. He led them toward a mechanics exhibition where small machines competed in obstacle courses. Most were sleek, fast, and expensive. Elias entered a device he had assembled from discarded repair parts. It resembled a silver lizard with mismatched legs and one wheel attached for reasons he could no longer remember. "What does it do?" Scylla asked. "Disappoints me professionally." The race began. Elias's machine took 2 steps, turned in the wrong direction, and climbed onto the judge's table. It knocked over a scoring beacon, became tangled in a banner, and began playing the colony anthem backward. The crowd laughed. Liri laughed harder than anyone. Her shoulders shook, and she pressed both hands over her mouth, but the sound continued. Scylla stood beside her in stunned silence, tears forming in her eyes. Elias retrieved the machine and bowed. A flawless demonstration of advanced human engineering. Later, they rested beneath a canopy of artificial leaves. Liri sat across from Elias while he repaired the mechanical lizard's damaged leg. "Machines are easier than people," he said. "When a machine is upset, smoke usually comes out." Liri watched his hands carefully. He used a tiny welding beam to attach the leg, but the machine immediately kicked him in the thumb. "Sometimes they are also rude." Liri smiled. Then slowly she reached beneath her coat. Scylla stopped breathing. The handmade toy emerged into the sunlight. Up close, Elias could see the care in every imperfect detail. Brass wings polished by small fingers, crystal fibers braided around the body, tiny gears placed unevenly but lovingly. The missing eye made the creature seem permanently curious. Liri held it against her chest for one final moment. Then she stood. She crossed the small space between them and placed the toy in Elias's hands. The world seemed to grow quiet. Scylla's face lost all color. "Liri." The child did not look away from Elias. Her eyes were nervous but certain. He held the toy as carefully as if it were alive. "Thank you," he whispered. Scylla sank slowly onto the bench. She has never done that. Not with anyone. The crystal body warmed beneath Elias's palms. A golden light awakened inside it, spreading through the braided fibers and into the brass wings. Tiny symbols appeared across its surface, rotating in rings too complex to be decoration. The festival lights flickered. Every hologram in the square turned toward Elias at the same time. Far beneath the colony, something ancient answered with a deep mechanical heartbeat. The mechanical heartbeat rolled beneath the festival square again, deep enough to tremble through the benches and send cups dancing across the tables. The holographic animals froze in midair. A luminous bird turned its head toward Elias, though its projection had no reason to possess curiosity. Then every artificial creature in the square lowered itself as if bowing to the toy in his hands. For one impossible moment, nobody spoke. A vendor finally looked at his floating soup bowls and said, "I knew offering discounts was a mistake." The silence broke into frightened murmurs. Elias kept both hands around the crystal creature. Golden symbols circled its body, passing over his fingers without touching them. Liri stood before him, calm despite the trembling ground. Scylla was not calm at all. She rose and moved beside her daughter, one hand on Liri's shoulder and the other near her energy blade. "Give it back," she whispered. Elias slowly extended the toy toward Liri, but the moment it left the center of his palms, the light dimmed. Liri shook her head and gently pushed his hands back. "She wants you to keep holding it," Scylla said, disbelief tightening her voice. "That is usually how gifts work." "This is not a gift." The ground opened beneath the center of the square. People scattered as paving stones separated in perfect circles, revealing a shaft descending into darkness. No dust rose. No pipes cracked. The mechanism had been waiting below the colony long before the colony existed. A column of amber light climbed from the opening and formed a rotating map of stars above the crowd. Thousands of systems appeared, connected by thin lines. One distant region pulsed in rhythm with the toy. Colony security drones swarmed overhead. Unregistered excavation detected, one announced. Elias looked down into the ancient shaft. Excellent work. The drone rotated toward him. Sarcasm detected. Even better. The toy suddenly unfolded in his hands. Its brass wings opened wider than their hinges should have allowed, revealing layers of crystal circuitry hidden inside. A narrow beam struck Elias's wrist and passed harmlessly through his skin. The star map changed. Images flashed around him. A civilization of tall figures standing beneath 3 suns. Cities grown from translucent stone. Vessels traveling through folded space. Children placing small crystal devices into the hands of strangers. Then the vision vanished. Liri grabbed Elias's sleeve. From the edge of the festival, 3 strangers were watching them. They wore dark civilian coats, but their faces were too still, their movements too perfectly synchronized. One raised a small device toward the toy. Sila noticed at the same moment. Down. A pulse of invisible force crossed the square. Sila pushed Liri behind the bench while Elias dropped to one knee. The pulse struck the holographic canopy above them, tearing it into a storm of glowing leaves. Security drones rushed toward the strangers, but 2 collapsed in midair, their systems erased before they reached the ground. The 3rd stranger stepped forward. "Return the key," he said. His voice came from every nearby speaker. Elias looked at the toy. "This?" The stranger's expression did not change. "You do not understand what you are holding. That makes 2 of us." Sila activated her blade. "Move away from my daughter." The stranger's eyes shifted toward Liri. The child was only the carrier. Something in Sila's face became colder than fear. She attacked. Her blade met a transparent shield with a violent green flash. Elias pulled Liri toward the open shaft as the stranger's companions drew compact weapons from beneath their coats. Festival visitors fled between stalls while food drones continued serving meals, apparently unwilling to let terrorism interfere with customer satisfaction. One rolled beside Elias. "Would you like additional sauce?" "Not now. Your refusal has been recorded." The attackers advanced. The toy vibrated in Elias's hands, then projected a thin bridge of light across the shaft. Symbols appeared beneath his feet, forming steps downward. Liri tugged him toward them. Sila blocked another blast and glanced back. "Go!" Elias hesitated only long enough to grab the broken mechanical lizard from the bench. Sila stared at him. "Why are you taking that?" "It has sentimental value. It tried to bite you. We have a complicated friendship." He followed Liri onto the bridge. The light held their weight, lowering them into the ancient darkness while Sila retreated after them. Above, the attackers reached the edge of the shaft. The circular opening began to close. The last thing Elias saw was the stranger's emotionless face framed by shrinking daylight. Then stone sealed overhead. Darkness surrounded them. A line of golden lights awakened one by one along the walls, revealing a vast underground corridor covered in the same symbols moving across Liri's toy. The passage stretched far beyond sight. Sila breathed heavily beside him. "This structure is older than our recorded history." The mechanical lizard in Elias's arms suddenly lifted its head. In a clear, unfamiliar voice it said, "Chosen bearer confirmed." Elias looked down at it. "I preferred you when you were stupid." The mechanical lizard climbed out of Elias's arms and landed on the glowing floor with a metallic clatter. Its mismatched legs adjusted themselves, the unnecessary wheel folded into its body, and a line of golden light appeared along its spine. "Chosen bearer confirmed," it repeated. Elias stared at it. "You spent 3 days walking into walls. Observation phase. You climbed into a soup pot. Environmental analysis." Sila looked between them. "Is this normal for human machines?" "Sadly, this one may be our finest achievement." The underground corridor brightened ahead. Symbols flowed across the walls like rivers of fire, rearranging themselves whenever Liri's toy pulsed. The girl stayed close to Elias now, one hand gripping his sleeve while the other rested against the crystal creature in his palms. Her fear had returned, but it no longer closed her away from him. Behind them, a dull impact shook dust from the ceiling. The attackers were trying to open the sealed entrance. "We need to move," Sila said. The mechanical lizard turned and marched into the darkness. "Archive access lies below." "How far below?" Elias asked. "Distance is irrelevant. That usually means far." They followed it through a passage that seemed to have been carved from a single piece of black glass. Beneath the transparent floor, enormous mechanisms rotated in silence, their gears wider than buildings. Some moved forward. Others turned backward. One appeared to rotate through dimensions Elias could not quite see without making his eyes ache. The corridor ended at a circular chamber. A suspended sphere filled its center, surrounded by rings of pale energy. As Elias entered, the sphere unfolded into thousands of moving images. Planets appeared, then vanished. Cities rose from oceans. Stars collapsed into silver threads and were woven into gates. Sila stopped beneath the projection. "This is not an archive," she whispered. "It is a memory system." Liri's toy floated from Elias's hands. The child reached for it, alarmed, but he crouched beside her. "It's all right," he said. "I'm watching it." Liri looked directly into his eyes, then slowly lowered her hand. The toy moved into the center of the chamber. Golden threads connected it to the surrounding rings. A voice filled the room, too old and layered to belong to a single speaker. "Bearer selected through voluntary trust." Sila's ears lowered. Liri chose him. "Correct." "Why?" The chamber changed. They saw Liri sitting alone in a small room aboard another ship, younger and thinner, repairing the toy with trembling hands. Her father knelt beside her, guiding her fingers. The image shifted. Sirens screamed. A vessel broke apart in space. Sila carried Liri through smoke while the girl clutched the unfinished toy against her chest. Then another memory appeared, Liri watching Elias repair the shuttle, leaving puzzles outside the residence, making ridiculous machines, and never once reaching for the treasure she guarded. The ancient voice continued. "Power sought is power denied. Trust freely given is access granted." Elias rubbed the back of his neck. "That is flattering, but I should mention I once stole a maintenance shuttle." Sila looked at him sharply. "I returned it." The lizard raised its head. "After collision." "That detail feels unnecessary." A violent explosion echoed through the corridor behind them. The entrance seal had failed. Red light spread across the chamber. The star projections vanished, replaced by the faces of the three attackers. Their leader stepped into the corridor, shield shimmering around him. "Hand over the key." His voice thundered through the chamber. "The child has already served her purpose." Liri flinched. Elias stood in front of her. "No," he said. The leader's expression remained cold. "You cannot protect her. I've been told I make poor decisions under pressure." Sila drew her energy blade. "For once, that may be useful." The attackers entered the chamber. Their weapons unfolded into narrow black rods, each surrounded by distorted air. One fired. Sila deflected the blast, but the impact drove her to one knee. Elias pulled Liri behind a crystal pillar as another pulse shattered the floor where they had stood. The mechanical lizard charged. It was not an impressive charge. One leg slipped, the wheel deployed by mistake, and it spun in a full circle before crashing into the leader's ankle. The leader looked down. Elias smiled. "Distracting, isn't it?" Sila attacked while his shield flickered. Her blade struck his weapon, sending it across the chamber. The remaining mercenaries opened fire. The toy flashed. A golden barrier expanded around Liri and Elias, absorbing every blast. Symbols appeared in the air before the child. She stared at them, breathing quickly. The ancient voice spoke again. "Bearer must choose." Elias saw two commands form inside the barrier. One would seal the chamber and destroy everyone outside it. The other would open the archive completely, exposing its location across the stars. Both choices were dangerous. The mercenary leader rose, blood on his lip. Use the weapon. Elias looked at the symbols. Then he laughed softly. It isn't a weapon. He touched neither command. Instead, he placed the toy back into Liri's hands. The chamber fell silent. The golden barrier vanished. Ciela stared at him. What did you do? What she did for me. Liri looked down at the toy, then at the attackers. Her small fingers moved across the crystal body with calm certainty. A third command appeared. The entire chamber awakened. Light poured through the mercenaries' weapons, dismantling them into harmless pieces. Their shields collapsed. The floor opened beneath them, trapping each attacker inside a transparent containment field. The leader struck the invisible wall. Impossible. The mechanical lizard sat beside him and announced, "Environmental analysis complete." Elias exhaled. "I'm beginning to like that machine." Liri stepped closer and placed her hand in his. For the first time, she spoke. "You did not take it." Her voice was quiet and rough from disuse. Elias looked down at her. "No," he said. "You gave it. There's a difference." Ciela covered her mouth, tears shining in her eyes. Far above them, beyond the colony and its copper sky, dozens of hidden ships received the same ancient signal. The key had awakened, and the galaxy had heard it. The first ships appeared above Nareth before the colony could restore power to the Eastern District. They emerged from folded space in flashes of white distortion, one after another, until the copper sky was crowded with silhouettes from a dozen civilizations. Some were narrow as blades. Others resembled floating cities wrapped in rotating rings. The largest vessel cast a shadow across half the settlement and immediately broadcast a message claiming peaceful intentions, which Elias considered the traditional opening sentence of anyone arriving with enough weapons to erase a continent. Deep beneath the festival square, the ancient chamber projected every ship around them as tiny points of light. Ciela studied the display while keeping Liri close. They followed the signal. "How long before they reach the surface entrance?" Elias asked. The mechanical lizard lifted its head. "Estimated time, 12 minutes. That is not enough time. Correction, 11 minutes, 58 seconds. Thank you. Much better." Inside the containment fields, the captured mercenary leader gave a humorless smile. "You cannot stop them. Every government, collector, and warlord in this sector has searched for the archive." Elias approached the transparent wall. "And you thought threatening a child was the clever way to open it?" The child was a biological lock. Liri's long ears lowered. Ciela crossed the chamber so quickly that the prisoner stepped back despite the barrier between them. "She has a name." The ancient system interrupted before the mercenary could answer. "Archive transfer requires planetary origin verification." The star map shifted. A single world appeared beyond the known trade routes, circling a dim red sun. Its surface was hidden beneath crystal storms. Ciela stared at it. "Valaris." "You know it?" Elias asked. "It is considered dead. No expedition has returned from there in 8,000 years. The mechanical lizard began walking toward a newly opened passage. "Primary memory vault located on Valaris." Elias sighed. "Of course it is. Ancient secrets are never stored somewhere pleasant with chairs." A circular platform rose from the floor at the end of the passage. Its surface shone like liquid glass. When Liri stepped onto it, lines of golden light climbed around her boots. Elias and Ciela followed. The lizard jumped aboard at the last moment and nearly rolled off the edge. The chamber vanished. There was no sensation of movement, only a brief pressure behind Elias's eyes. Then cold wind struck his face. They stood beneath a crimson sky. Valaris stretched around them in silence. Crystal dunes rose like frozen waves, each one reflecting distant lightning from a storm that circled the horizon. Broken towers floated upside down above the desert, held aloft by failing gravity engines. Their shadows drifted across the ground in the wrong direction. Liri tightened her grip on Elias's hand. "This place feels lonely," she whispered. Scylla looked at her daughter with quiet wonder each time she spoke, as if every word were a star appearing where darkness had been. "It has been alone for a long time," Elias said. A low chime sounded beneath the sand. The toy opened its brass wings and projected a path toward the floating ruins. They crossed the crystal desert slowly. Each step created musical notes beneath their boots, turning the journey into a clumsy song. Elias tried to match the rhythm. He failed so badly that even Scylla laughed. "You walk like a damaged cargo robot," she said. "I am adapting to local culture." The local culture appears to be falling down. Ahead, a tower rotated and lowered itself until its broken entrance touched the desert. Inside waited rows of ancient machines shaped like tall, narrow figures. Their faces were blank metal masks. All of them turned toward the travelers at once. "Visitors," one said in a voice filled with static. "You are late." "By how much?" Elias asked. 8,314 years. There was traffic. The machines surrounded them, but none raised a weapon. Instead, they examined Liri's toy and then bowed to the child. "The maker's line continues," their leader said. Scylla went still. Her father built that toy from a navigation engine. He completed what his ancestors began. A projection appeared above the machines. Liri's father stood within it, younger than in the chamber's memory. He was assembling the crystal body while speaking to someone beyond the recording. "If she ever gives it willingly," he said, "the archive will know she has found someone who values her more than its power." Liri watched without blinking. Scylla's hand covered her heart. The recording continued. "The archive was created to repair damaged worlds, but those who built it saw what rulers would do to possess such knowledge. So they hid it behind a choice no tyrant could understand." Elias looked down at Liri. "Trust," he said. The machine leader nodded. "The key does not choose the strongest bearer. It chooses the one who refuses to own it." The ground suddenly shook. Beyond the tower entrance, black shapes descended through the red clouds. The pursuing fleet had found Valaris. Energy beams struck the desert, turning crystal dunes into boiling light. The ancient machines moved into defensive formation. "Vault defenses failing," one announced. Elias examined the chamber around them. A vast ring mechanism stood embedded in the rear wall, its surface dark. "What does that activate?" "Planetary Restoration Network." "Can it stop the ships?" "No." "Can it make them regret coming?" The machine paused. "Yes." Liri placed her toy into the center of the ring. The entire tower awakened. Across Valaris, floating ruins turned upright. Crystal storms curved inward, drawn into ancient atmospheric engines. Thousands of buried structures rose from beneath the desert, and a wave of golden energy spread around the planet. The attacking vessels lost power simultaneously. They remained suspended above the surface, helpless but unharmed. Elias looked at the darkened ships. "That seems appropriately embarrassing." The mechanical lizard climbed onto a control pedestal. Restoration sequence complete. Then it stepped backward, fell into an empty maintenance container, and became stuck upside down. Scylla looked at Elias. "Your finest achievement?" He listened to the machine's legs kicking uselessly against the metal. "Humanity prefers humility." For nearly an hour, the ships above Valaris drifted helplessly beneath the crimson clouds, their weapons silent and their engines locked by the planet's restored network. No vessel had been damaged. That, Elias decided, made the humiliation much more effective. The ancient tower filled with golden light as long dormant systems awakened across the world. Beyond the entrance, the crystal dunes softened into flowing fields of silver grass. Atmospheric engines pulled poison from the sky, and the red storms broke apart, revealing stars that had not been visible from the surface in thousands of years. Liri stood before the restoration ring with both hands around her toy. Its cracked crystal body no longer flickered uncertainly. It glowed with a calm, warm light. Saela knelt beside her. "Your father knew this day might come." Liri looked at the fading image of him above the machines. "Did he know Elias would come?" "No," Elias said. "He probably hoped for someone taller and better dressed." Liri smiled. "I chose you." The words reached him more deeply than any praise he had ever received. Before meeting her, Elias had believed usefulness was the same as belonging. He repaired engines, answered distress calls, and left before anyone could depend on him for more than a working machine. It had always seemed safer that way. Now a small hand slipped into his, and leaving no longer felt simple. The machine leader approached them. "The archive awaits its bearer's command." A vast projection opened above the tower. It contained formulas for healing damaged atmospheres, restoring poisoned oceans, rebuilding extinct ecosystems, and stabilizing dying stars. The knowledge could save entire civilizations. It could also make whichever empire controlled it nearly unstoppable. The trapped fleet began transmitting demands. One government offered Elias a title, another offered wealth. A warlord promised not to destroy the colony if the archive was surrendered immediately. Elias listened to the messages and rubbed his chin. "That last offer lacks charm." Saela studied him. "What will you do?" Every projection in the tower turned toward him. The mercenaries, now held aboard a disabled prison ship, watched through a communications channel. The colony council waited from Nereth. Across the sector, rulers and military commanders expected one man to claim the most valuable discovery in recorded history. Elias looked down at Liri's toy. He remembered how carefully she had guarded it. He remembered the courage it had taken for her to place it in his hands. She had not chosen him because he desired power. She had chosen him because he had asked for nothing. "The archive does not belong to me," he said. The watching leaders began shouting at once. "It does not belong to Liri either," Elias continued. "Her father protected this knowledge so no single ruler could own it. We will release the restoration sciences openly to every world under one condition. The systems may only be activated through shared authorization between different civilizations." The ancient machines remained silent for several seconds. Then the leader bowed. Choice accepted. The archive divided itself into thousands of encrypted fragments and transmitted them across the galaxy. No government received enough to control it alone. Human, alien, machine, and independent worlds would have to cooperate to use the greatest technology ever found. The warlord disconnected immediately. "He seemed upset," Saela said. "Some people dislike teamwork. It creates witnesses." The planetary network released the ships one by one after disabling their weapons and recording their identities. Most fled. A few remained to offer assistance, suddenly eager to appear peaceful now that domination was inconvenient. The mercenaries were transferred to the Nereth authorities. Their leader refused to speak during the journey home, although the mechanical lizard sat outside his containment cell and repeatedly announced, "Environmental analysis complete." Elias allowed it. Weeks later, the colony rebuilt the damaged festival square. The ancient entrance beneath it remained open, now protected by a joint scientific council. Saela was invited to represent her people, and for the first time since the crash, she wore no armor. Liri changed more slowly. She still hid behind her mother when crowds became too loud. She still kept the toy beside her while she slept. But she began speaking in short sentences, then longer ones. She joined the colony children during their mechanical races and built a small crystal bird that flew backward into walls. Elias declared it excellent human engineering. On the evening before Saela's repaired shuttle was scheduled to depart, he found them beneath the glowing tree outside the residence. His old rescue crawler waited nearby, making a noise that suggested several important parts were considering retirement. Saela looked toward the stars. "We do not have to leave tomorrow." Elias raised an eyebrow. I have accepted the council position, she said. Liri wishes to remain here for a while. Liri stepped forward with the toy in her hands. For a moment, Elias thought she was giving it to him again. Instead, she opened a small panel in its side and removed the missing blue eye, newly repaired with a tiny golden ring. My father made the first half, she said. I made the rest. She placed the blue crystal in Elias's palm. So you remember? He closed his fingers around it. I don't think forgetting you was ever a serious risk. Liri hugged him. Sila watched with the same astonishment she had shown the first time her daughter trusted him, but now her surprise carried warmth rather than fear. Above them, new stars appeared as Valaris's restoration network sent healing signals toward wounded worlds. The galaxy had not become peaceful overnight. Governments still argued, merchants still lied, and Elias's breakfast machine continued producing beverages that might legally qualify as industrial solvents. But something had changed. A child who had trusted no one had found her voice. A mother who had lived only to protect had found a place where she no longer stood alone. And a man who had spent his life repairing other people's journeys had finally allowed himself to become part of one. Liri took his hand and pointed toward the festival lights. Come on, she said. My bird is racing. Does it know which direction to go? No. Elias smiled as they walked together toward the square. Then it has an excellent chance,